In the 1980s, everyday American life looked very different from today. The costs were lower, the pace slower, and the culture, though full of change, carried a sense of community and tradition that feels almost unrecognizable now. Let's take a trip back and relive what life was like during that decade. Drinking ages weren't uniform across the country. Some states still allowed 18 or 19-year-olds to legally order a beer. In the early 80s, bars near state borders became teenage destinations. Cars packed with kids chasing a legal drink, radios blasting classic rock, laughter rolling through the night. Today it sounds reckless, but back then, it was seen as normal. Just another local quirk of geography and law. Gas was cheap. In 1985, the national average hovered around $1.20 a gallon. $5 filled your tank and left enough for a burger and fries. Road trips weren't luxuries, they were regular weekend adventures. Families loaded into station wagons, kids sprawled in the back seat without seat belts, fighting over who got the window seat. No GPS, just a folded Rand McNally map and Dad's stubborn sense of direction. Cars themselves were boxy, heavy, and loud. You didn't see sleek digital dashboards or touchscreens. Instead, you saw cassette decks, cigarette lighters, and fabric seats that trapped summer heat. People worked on their own cars in their driveways, oil stains marking the pavement like badges of honor. Saturday afternoons meant hoods popped open, tools scattered, neighbors leaning over the engine bay offering unsolicited advice. A new home in 1980 cost about $68,000. By mid-decade, it crept closer to $90,000. Compare that to today's six-figure down payments. Back then, a single income could cover a mortgage, bills, and still leave room for vacations. Middle-class families bought homes, not just dreamed about them. Owning a backyard, a swing set, and maybe a pool above ground wasn't luxury. It was achievable. Grocery shopping was a different story too. A gallon of milk cost around $2, a dozen eggs less than $1. Bananas were 30 cents a pound. Coupons weren't scanned with apps. Moms clipped them carefully from Sunday newspapers, storing them in envelopes that jingled as carts rolled down aisles. Supermarkets smelled like waxed floors, coffee grinding in the corner, and fresh bread baking behind the counter. Fast food chains exploded during this decade. McDonald's wasn't just a drive-through stop, it was a cultural landmark. Happy Meals came with toys kids actually collected. Burger King had its "Have it your way" slogan. Pizza Hut meant red vinyl booths, Tiffany-style lamps, and jukeboxes you could feed with quarters. Friday night pizza runs weren't rushed online orders. Families sat down, shared pitchers of soda, and lingered. Entertainment was tactile. VHS tapes lined shelves, their clunky plastic cases a sign of family movie night. Blockbuster stores popped up everywhere, and a trip there was an event. Kids wandered aisles hunting cartoons, teens grabbed horror flicks, and dads browsed action thrillers. Late fees became the bane of every household, but no one minded too much. It was all part of the ritual. Television offered fewer channels, but somehow more togetherness. Cable expanded choices, but network TV still ruled evenings. Families gathered around living room sets the size of furniture, tuning into Cheers, Family Ties, or The Cosby Show. Remote controls weren't universal yet. Someone, usually the youngest, got stuck turning the dial or fiddling with rabbit ear antennas, aluminum foil wrapped at odd angles to catch a clearer signal. Saturday mornings belonged to kids. Cartoons aired in bright blocks. Transformers, He-Man, Thundercats, The Smurfs. Cereal commercials screamed between shows. Frosted Flakes, Cap'n Crunch, Count Chocula. Milk sloshed across kitchen tables as kids shoveled sugary bites into their mouths, eyes glued to the screen. Parents rarely interfered. For those few hours, Saturday was sacred. Schools felt different too. Chalkboards squeaked under teachers' hands. Overhead projectors whirred as worksheets appeared on translucent sheets. Kids passed handwritten notes instead of texts. Trapper keepers snapped shut with their trademark Velcro. Math homework was scratched out on wide-ruled paper. And when the final bell rang, students went home. No online portals, no midnight emails. School stayed at school. Teen culture thrived in malls. Shopping malls weren't just for buying clothes. They were social centers, buzzing with neon lights and food courts. Teens hung out at arcades, pockets bulging with quarters, competing for high scores on Pac-Man or Galaga. Music poured from record stores. Groups of friends roamed endlessly, not to spend money, but to be seen. Speaking of music, the 80s had a sound all its own. Cassette tapes rattled inside Walkmans clipped to belts. Boom boxes blasted Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, and Bruce Springsteen across sidewalks. Radios didn't shuffle or skip. You waited for your favorite song, finger hovering on the record button, ready to tape it onto a homemade mixtape. Fashion was loud, bright, and unapologetic. Neon windbreakers, acid-wash jeans, shoulder pads, and leg warmers. Sneakers weren't collector's items. They were worn, scuffed, and replaced when outgrown. Kids begged for Jordache jeans or Reebok pumps, not because of resale value, but because it made them feel like they belonged. Clothes were about identity, not algorithms. Communication was slower, but somehow more intentional. Telephones were tethered to walls, cords stretching down hallways while siblings screamed for their turn. Answering machines beeped with red blinking lights. Long-distance calls carried weight. You watched the clock because every minute cost. Letters and postcards filled gaps, carrying handwriting that felt personal, tangible, and lasting. Neighborhoods felt tighter. Kids roamed outside until the streetlights flickered on. Bikes clattered against fences. Basketballs echoed on driveways. And every cul-de-sac had its unofficial gathering spot. Parents didn't track kids with apps. They trusted routines and the watchful eyes of neighbors. If you got in trouble, chances were your mom knew before you even walked home. Technology at home was simple, but exciting. Home computers like the Commodore 64 or Apple II sat on desks, screens glowing green or amber. Kids played Oregon Trail, dying of dysentery more often than surviving. Floppy disks slid in with a click. Printers screeched noisily, paper curling with perforated edges. These machines weren't daily tools yet. They were novelties, glimpses into the future. Video games were rising fast. The Nintendo Entertainment System revived the market in 1985. Kids blew into cartridges, controllers wired to the console. Games weren't endless streams of downloads. They were treasured purchases. Beating Super Mario Bros. Wasn't just achievement. It was bragging rights across the entire block. News traveled differently. Morning papers slapped onto driveways, ink smudging fingers over breakfast. Evening broadcasts carried weight. Anchors like Dan Rather or Peter Jennings delivered headlines with gravity, not push notifications. Tragedies, triumphs, politics, all digested once a day, not every second. Information had time to breathe. Work culture wasn't remote. Offices buzzed with typewriters, fax machines, and copy rooms. Dress codes leaned formal, men in ties, women in blouses and skirts. Smoke breaks were still common. Water coolers hosted gossip. When the clock struck 5, most people went home. Work didn't chase them into bedrooms through glowing screens. Vacations were analog too. Families packed suitcases into trunks, drove to beaches or campgrounds, and snapped photos on disposable cameras. Waiting to develop film became part of the ritual, with surprises tucked into every envelope of glossy prints. No instant filters, no retakes. Memories were raw, imperfect, but cherished. Even holidays carried a different weight. Christmas shopping meant crowded malls, arms straining under bags. Black Friday was busy, but not chaotic mobs. More excitement than fear. Halloween meant homemade costumes or drugstore masks with rubber bands that snapped halfway through the night. 4th of July, barbecues filled backyards, fireworks cracked across neighborhoods, not professional displays on giant screens. Life in the 80s wasn't perfect. Inflation rose, politics shifted, and fears of the Cold War lingered in the background. But daily life carried a rhythm, steady, tangible, and community-driven. There was less convenience, but more presence. Less noise, but more memory. Today, looking back, the 80s feel both distant and familiar. The world has sped up, grown louder, and turned digital. We gained efficiency, endless connection, and instant access. But we lost some of the slowness, the trust, the analog warmth. The 1980s remind us of a time when everyday life felt both ordinary and extraordinary, stitched together by simple rituals, shared spaces, and moments that lingered long after they passed.